Welcome back to Lit versus Genre, everybody. I am Steve.
And I'm Jeff.
And today, probably, Jeff, the episode I'm most excited for of all of
Really?
our episodes. Yeah, well, I feel
Even more
like,
than Lolita? Even more?
oh, yeah. I don't know. I think I'm more excited about this because
Mm.
I think you're going to be a little bit more jazzed for this than you were for Lolita. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But let me
I
explain to everybody what we're doing
Sure.
here because we
Yep.
watched Batman last week, and also Jeff subjected me to his favorite thing of all time, and I didn't get to fully subject him to my favorite thing of all time, which was Lolita.
True.
So I
It's
said,
true.
okay, well, let's talk Batman because I think the two best Batman comics easily are the two Frank Miller classics, Dark Knight
Mm.
Returns and Batman Year One. They're also kind of fascinating because they're super different while still being like kind of obviously Frank Miller. I think he really does a really interesting style change while definitely being very him at the same time in both of those. So I'm hoping that we could maybe, next week if you're down, unless you're really sick of Batman, if you want to read the second best Batman thing of all time, we could read
We'll
that.
see. We'll see if I can have it in time for that. But yeah, no, I'm definitely down to compare and contrast the works. Absolutely. Because I do like seeing writers change style over time because I feel like that's a very common conversation in art, right? Like we talk about
Mm-hmm.
periods that an artist goes through, right? But I feel like that conversation doesn't happen as much with writers and sort of periods in writing styles that they go through.
Well, oh
So,
my goodness, we could talk about that for days with Frank Miller because there's a lot of
mm,
his.
okay,
Definitely, you can say people. He's much more decisive. Not decisive. What's the word I'm looking for? Divisive
okay,
now than he was back then in a pretty massive way. But what's kind of funny about
mm,
Dark Knight Returns in year one is that they were written months apart from each other, like a year. They came out a year apart from each other.
mm,
Yet they are very
mm,
different in kind of tone and style, I think. But anyway, we're here today to talk about The Dark Knight Returns, which is also over
we are.
time. People looking back at it, there are some big time critics of this
Mm,
looking
okay.
back. At the time, this like people were blown away by this, like
Yeah, I want to hear some of the history. Like, keep going. Yeah.
absolutely blown away by it. So Frank Miller basically makes a name for himself writing Daredevil at
Okay.
Marvel, and that's where he comes up. Well, he started actually drawing Daredevil first, and then somebody else was writing it, and then over time he eventually kind of took over writing it and wrote and drew Daredevil for a large percent of its run, and then worked at least on one major arc that people fondly remember with this other artist, David Mazzucchelli, who is the artist for Batman Year One, and a guy I just think is absolutely gorgeous and incredible. But he goes over to DC, kind of a big high profile defection because, Marvel
Mm,
DC, very much a
right.
rivalry, particularly in the 80s. And he goes over and he gets this is the first thing he comes out with in DC. No, oh, it was
Th
Ronin
this
DC?
this this was the very first thing.
Well, actually, there was Ronin, and I can't. Yeah, I think DC released Ronin too, actually, but I might be forgetting. That might be wrong. But he basically goes over to DC, and they kind of give him carte blanche to
Mm,
do what he wants, essentially. And he does this work, Ronin, which is didn't sell that well, I don't think, but it was pretty high regarded, and it's a very interesting book. And then he comes out with this, and this is just an absolute runaway success. Like
mm,
blows people
mhm.
away. Everybody loves it, and it kind of has this high reputation for years and years and years and years. And I, read this. I guess honestly, not too long after it comes out. I think it comes out 85 or 86.
Okay.
This, and I am probably reading it either in like 88 or 89, which is like right when I get into comics. So this is like
Oh, you wrote it like right as a kid. Yeah, you were spoiled right off the bat.
this is one of the first comics that I
Yeah.
read, I think.
Dude,
And
dude.
it's just incredible. And I'm gonna talk about like all
I think we
some
need
of
to
the
talk about
things.
that. Right.
Yeah,
Well, I
that.
think we need to talk about firsts and how firsts create a love of a genre. Like that's what happened
Mm,
with me for anime. Like I saw one of the best animes, like in my opinion, of all time as my very first one.
hmm.
So anyway, but please continue. I just think it's interesting to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I one of my interests in doing this, and maybe we should watch that anime. Maybe we should kind of go back to like what's our
Oh.
formative things, and like how does again
Oh,
somebody who's a
dude, stop
noob.
getting me excited.
Same.
Yeah, that sounds
It's fun,
awesome.
right? It's
That sounds
fun.
awesome.
So,
I'll have to look up to see if there was any manga that it was based on, because almost all anime has
mm,
manga. Because I've
yeah.
never read, but anyway, yeah. But go ahead, go ahead. I'm
So
just excited.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious, like this
Hmm.
being one of my favorite things of all time. I've read it like a
Yeah.
zillion times. Just how somebody coming in older, completely
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
fresh to it entirely. I mean,
Mhm.
what was your reaction? What did you think of this thing?
Dude, I have so many reactions. Like, I mean, I don't know how you couldn't have just a bajillion reactions to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's too dense not to. Which I do think is one of the first things that I would say as like a noob comic book reader, which I absolutely am. The only, uh, like, I would say regular comics that I've read would be Watchmen. Watchmen was the very first comic that I
Mm-hmm.
ever read because my roommate was like, "Oh, comics here, read this one,"
Yeah.
and I was like, "Right." But then it didn't inspire me to like read a bunch more comics because I don't know why. But so that one, and I think that. Oh no! And then for American comics, I've read some fantasy ones like some Rat Queens and Saga. I
Mm.
would say Saga is probably one of the more
Mm-hmm.
well-known ones that I've read.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this to me, I felt very much like a noob and Invincible, right? Because this was hard for me to read. Like I
Mm.
felt like you seriously reading Wheel of Time, where you were like, I had to read it twice. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you would say that to me about paragraphs, I'm like, really? I mean, for
Right,
the
right, right,
prologue, I got it, right? But then
right.
later you'd be like, I had to read it again. I was like, really? I think it's pretty obvious, dude. I was three, four times going back and reading panels, still trying to figure out what it meant.
Right.
So yeah, this to me is a tough comic to read
Mm-hmm.
as a noob. It was also a little tricky to think that I was getting the right one. I almost bought like a $50 pack of this
Uh
and like a Batman mask because it was like the only one I
oh.
could buy. But because they list it online on Amazon as if this is like just part two or something. But anybody who's new into comics and wants to get this, it's not expensive or hard. It's actually just get the one with this cover, and
Right.
it's like less than 20 bucks. So and
Yeah.
you're fine. It's the whole thing right here. But anyway, so just as a noob, those were some of my hurdles as a noob of like, wait, which one am I supposed to be buying? It seems like there's a bunch of them. And then reading it, I was like, this, oh, I'm not even sure what's happening. I will say I did get more used to it, just the way it kind of bounces around. But those
Yeah.
are just kind of some of my like noob reactions. But even toward the end, I'd still be rereading parts, being like, "Wait, did he shift to a different character? Like, wait,
Mm.
what was that?" But I would say I found the first one the most confusing, personally.
Interesting. Okay.
But I think that was also perhaps me just adjusting to the style of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
interesting that that I mean I think the
yeah.
first issue is the best of
Interesting.
them. And
Okay,
talk
okay.
and I'll talk about why, but I find like
They
just
came
in
out
a
separately, right? That you
yeah,
were
each
waiting every
issue,
week
one,
or
two, three,
something?
four, every month, I
Every month.
believe.
Oh,
Like I
so
said,
you're
I
waiting a
read it.
month between.
Well,
Oh,
I
you read
read
it all
it
together though.
collected. Yeah,
Right.
I was a
Okay.
couple
Okay.
years later coming to it,
Yep.
so I read it collected.
Right.
So you were waiting a month or so in
Hmm.
between, and these are pretty
Right.
hefty issues. I actually don't
Hmm.
remember how many. It's bigger than a normal
Yeah.
comic,
Oh no,
and
this took me a chunk of time. Like this
yeah,
was, a
yeah.
day for me to read, which I mean was I wasn't expecting that. Like I wasn't expecting it to be as dense or as
Mm,
full as it was. But yeah,
mm,
this feels like I just read a novel. Like hands down. Like it's
yeah.
Yeah, but please go ahead.
Well, so
Um,
I think one thing that I think is interesting about this also
mm,
is one of the comics, along with Watchmen, that kind of heralds
mm,
the grim and gritty
right.
thing. And reading it, you can see, I don't know, like how, like maybe parts of this thing shows up in
Mm,
almost every Batman movie that's like
right.
come out in the
Well,
last like 40 years. Like it's like they just steal liberally from it, right? In ways that I think often are not very successful because they're
dude.
so out of context of this comic.
Exactly. Like, dude, I would say my overriding emotion, besides, various things I experienced, in the story itself was anger and frustration. That's that they don't just make this. That like,
Right.
why am I suffering through these DC movies when they have this to draw on it? It's just
Yeah.
like, I mean, I could make the argument. It's like I feel impassioned again, like as we talked about before, the adaptations. But like seriously, this one page of the
Uh-huh.
woman on the train that's during issue two,
Right.
I
Amazing.
experienced I experienced more emotion reading
Amazing.
this single page than I did in the entire new Batman movie,
Yeah,
hands
I
down.
mean, it is
And I'm
it.
not, and I'm mediocre. I'm like, yeah, the new Batman movie is okay, like better than some that have happened. So I'm not hating on the new Batman movie. I'm saying how good this is. Like
Yeah,
why would you not use this? It's after the splash of him hanging the
yeah.
guy off the,
I
which is also
actually, I guess I can
amazing.
find it.
The reveal of that is so good too,
Uh
where
huh.
they're just talking in the dark. So you get two like incredible things back to back. He's talking in the dark, and then his fingers slowly like pull away. Like
Right.
this gave me a respect for comics that I hadn't gotten previously. Like there are some
Uh huh.
things in this that I'm like, I don't know how you do it better in a different medium. Because I've said before, like comics to me are just like what did I say, like cheaper, like anime or something like that. I was like, this is just without the somebody paying for the entire animation.
Hmm.
But this does it in a way that, yeah, you get to focus on a frame for as long as you want. And that just lets you linger in a
Hmm.
feeling. And I found myself doing that. So I felt like Frank Miller was really exploiting the medium in this in
Yeah.
a fascinating way. It confused me in some parts,
Uh huh.
but there are other parts like this scene with the woman. I thought about it as a movie. I thought about it as
Yes.
a novel. I thought about it. I'm like, it wouldn't. There's just something about the way the narrator is
Hmm.
and the visuals are, because you can't
Hmm.
jump like this. I'm sorry, I'm jumping by talking about this, but my point is just that it made me angry because this to me shows that there's incredible writing that exists. And again, filmmakers continue to frustrate me with the trash that they should like just put out there. And again, I'm not saying the new Batman is that. I'm just saying, wow, like you've got this. Why aren't you using it? I guess it's like you say, um, they're stealing ideas and concepts from it
Yeah.
all the time,
Snippets.
but they're not understanding, I think, what makes it work. Like they're not seeing the overall picture or the
Yeah.
the brilliance of certain. No, don't get me wrong, I have critiques of this, but yeah, I would say that none of the Batmans I have seen have captured what this does.
And let me
Like
also
the tone.
say, going
Yeah,
back to the grim
there
and
it is.
gritty thing,
Mhm,
I mean, it does get more grim than this
mhm.
page, really.
Amazing.
But I don't
Amazing.
know. I think what often people bemoan this grim and gritty thing, the
Mm.
problem with it is it doesn't have this level of humanity to go
Right.
along with the grim and gritty, right? It's
Right.
just
You have
like
to see it.
it almost becomes just like grim and gritty later just becomes there's nothing to connect to. There's no
Oh,
real human life
it,
that would actually make you feel sad or
right.
make you feel
Yeah.
happy as this roller coaster of a page, which just gives you like a
Yeah.
dozen emotions throughout it. And that's the
Yeah.
thing that separates Frank Miller. Like, okay, it's grim and gritty, but
Mm.
it's not just that. Like he's using it
What's the
in a very
humanity?
specific way. Totally.
It's humanity, and that's what makes you need Batman. Like that's the
Mhm.
argument that Batman's gone like too far in this. Like he's like
Mhm.
just breaking people that are bad, right? And then even inspiring this group that's like anti-criminal. It's like what we talked about last week with Batman, how you said one of the things you liked about the new movie, which I agreed, which was that they painted the city in these kind of darker tones, like that things were really bad, right?
Mm.
Well, that was just scratching the surface of what this does. No, no, this, and I see why you liked it in the other because, echoes of this, but it is only echoes. Like this shows a city that is at war. This
Mm.
felt at war to me. The closest I feel I've seen to it, you're gonna totally laugh, is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Because in
Wait,
that
the first one?
movie, the first one, the
I've
first one,
not
because
seen
they're
it. It's
my
been
goodness.
too long. No,
Oh,
I've seen it,
no.
but it's been,
Okay,
I can't
okay,
remember
okay.
when.
Oh, that's a movie I just go back. That movie. Oh, we have to do that movie. It's because I've never read the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics, and I really
Mm.
want to.
Mm.
So that okay. We got plans here. But anyway, my point is just that in that movie, they showcase the city as having these problems because they show all the crime that's happening to all these different people in different circumstances.
Mm.
And then you see where all that stuff's being taken and the kids together. And it becomes like you feel the crime wave, is what I'm saying.
Mm.
Now,
Mm.
it's not gritty like this is, or even
Yeah,
that
right.
grim because it's got the funner tones, but you feel the city going through something in
Mm.
that movie. And this is that it's on steroids basically. But another example of the humanity is Batman with the general, right? And the
Mm.
general's given the stuff away, right?
Right.
And there's this one scene. So there's the amazing splash where it's like him holding a body and a flag, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Batman's like, I didn't even ask.
Yeah.
And then the skillful use of news reporting. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping off. This is my last one. It was just something else that
Yeah.
really, really stood out to me. Oh no, there's a Superman thing. This thing made me feel, yeah, you got it right there.
Mm.
So the skillful use, it's what is it? Yeah, three frames. Or what is it supposed to be called? I'm calling the box a
Panels.
single box of frame panel.
Yeah.
Wait, I thought the panel isn't the whole page. The panel is just one.
Panels just one
Okay,
box.
okay.
Right.
Noob learning things. So yeah, three panels conveys, and I completely understand the general. I completely
Exactly.
understand why he would, and
And
that's the humanity. It's not just about a general that did something crap
mm.
for money, right? Like it's because, and I normally am kind of annoyed by the bolding of words. It feels like sort of
Mm.
like,
Mm.
again, as a non-comic book reader, I'm like, I got it. You don't need a bold word.
Mm.
But that one felt to me so appropriate. I could just feel him like digging into insurance companies, and that feels universal. Like
Mm.
that feels like something we could still all be angry about healthcare system, insurance, right?
Right.
Even if things get better at times, it's still a frustrating system, and that really like I was like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I,
anyway,
I love having to wait for it just slightly to get that
mhm,
explanation.
yep,
I love
mhm,
one of the things I love about this comic, and one of I think the
yep,
things that's sad about both this and Year One in a way is that like the
mm.
grim and gritty tone is what everybody emulated, and they
They
didn't
forgot about the
emulate.
humanity.
Well, they forgot about the humanity. I also am
Mm.
really mad that nobody really did pacing like
Well, the
this in
news
modern
reporting,
comics.
yeah,
The that actually, well, Todd McFarlane pretty famously kind of stole that for a lot of Spawn, as well.
mm.
These like that became instantly iconic was the cutting
Oh, I
away
was
to
thinking
all
of
these,
movies, but yeah, yeah.
and yeah, it feels very movie-ish. But like just this that like, well, this page has no setup. This page with Batman right here,
Yeah,
right?
it's just
Like you're
there,
just hit
right?
it with it, and you do piece together. I like
Mm.
how smart it considers the reader, right? Like you have
Something
to
I feel
kind
that's really
of,
been lost. But go
yeah,
ahead, yeah.
like you have to piece it together. It's not spoon feeding it to you. And then we go to Robin for like this very short cutaway. Then we go to Batman
Mm.
for these two panels for a very short cutaway. Then
Right,
we get the news report to
right.
explain a little bit more
What that?
context of
Yeah.
what happened on
Hmm.
this page. Then we get a perfect transition, and he's
Mm.
pretty much kills transitions here. And like one of the things that
Yeah.
I think sells like how mythic this is how he builds every splash page to just
Mm.
with words, not with images. He builds it with words, and this is where like
Mm.
I think part of my love of comics is that you get a sentence on a page, so you get to
Mm.
appreciate a sentence on a
Mm.
page
A single
and
sentence, yeah, to
how it
focus.
looks, and then connect it in your mind to the words. So like here's just like a pretty basic one
Mm.
where it transitions to, oh, the commissioner's trying to decide who or the
Mm.
governor or the mayor's trying to decide who the new
Mm.
commissioner will be, and then we go to that. But like this sort of pacing people don't do this. People put like a scene on a page. They won't
Mhm.
break a scene in the middle of a page anymore. They kind
Oh,
of, this is
because he
what's
breaks it like four
slowing.
times, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah, in this one thing, we're all over the place. We jump around
See,
to four
and
different
see, that's why
scenes.
it's tricky. I think that's why it's tricky for me, right? Because I'm not used to that.
Yeah, that's
Even
true.
when he bounces, because yeah, one of the early ones that confuses me is because he's bouncing back and forth every panel.
Right.
Every panel is he's going between two things,
Ah,
and I get it
yes.
from like a movie quality. And when I got it, I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is great. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
I was starting to really like it, but yeah, no, completely. Um, but I hear you about how that would create pacing and build in a way
And
um,
you can
that drives
vary
the
it.
narrative.
You can
Hmm.
vary
Yeah,
it.
because he
And
doesn't do it all the time.
he doesn't do it all the time. He knows
Hmm.
when to do it, and
Hmm.
he knows when to. What it felt a lot like to me was the idea of
Hmm.
cross-cutting in
Hmm.
movies. That
Hmm.
like when think of the Dark Knight, Nolan's The Dark Knight. One of the most kind of
Yeah.
exciting parts of that movie is like right before um, Joker's plan kind of comes together, and
Hmm.
if you watch it, what really gives it its kind of momentum is you keep cutting to these different things where like the cards are showing up, like the I think the
Hmm.
current police commissioner is going to pour himself some whiskey, but it's like poisoned or something, and then you cut away from that and you cut to like the judge or something,
Hmm.
and like how I forget how Joker's planning to kill him, but it keeps cutting, and then like you can build the momentum of it. You do the cuts
Right.
faster.
Right.
You make
Right.
the
Right.
cuts
Right.
go faster, and then that builds the excitement, and then boom, you get with the big hit. So like,
And you're right, you do get to do that with, yeah, because that, I'm sorry, just to bring back to fantasy, because that's where I'm at. That's why I love
mm,
multiple POV novels, right?
mm,
Because you can have this build of tension with one character, and then we cut away, and that keeps that tension there. And obviously, it can be done poorly, and people get frustrated, like, just bring me back to that character.
mm,
And it is tricky because you're reading a chapter, right? Which is so
mm,
much longer than maybe a couple panels or a few seconds, as it might be in a movie.
yeah,
But yeah, no, that it's just interesting you're saying that because that's a technique that I really like in fantasy novels, but it does frustrate some people and it's got to be executed well. Whereas here it feels like it's a little easier. Now you're selling me on this on the, oh, well, just on the medium of comics
yeah.
and what you can
But
do with comics. That's cool.
it's kind
Yeah.
of fascinating to hear that like if you've mainly read more modern comics, this might feel very alien to you. Just that how quickly it changes
Yeah.
scenes, and because you don't
Hmm.
have always like an establishing shot. I think that's like something that
Right.
modern comics have
Right.
like sort of just cribbed from movies, but in a crappy way. That like, oh, the
Mm,
top left
yeah.
hand corner is always going to be some establishing
Is the
shot, so I
beginning thing.
know I'm
Yeah.
in a new scene, so I know,
Right.
and just but it just zaps the pace and like the editing
Well,
so
then you're
hard.
beholden to that. Yeah, like to be beholden to that every time. Yeah, no, I can. Yeah,
I
yeah. I
don't
mean, there are some crazy pages
I
on
don't
this
think
too.
like any comic, I don't think there's any comic that's more exciting. Like actually just I
Then
feel
this.
adrenaline. Yeah, like while reading it. Like
Yeah.
Watchmen is a
Well,
wonderful comic, but
I mean, like, look at
it's
this
not
page.
exciting.
Like
Yeah.
with this huge thing, then like two little panels, then like all the panels here. Yeah, he really because he does. And again, total noob question, but it's fun. I am
Mm.
enjoying being in this like noob chair. So he does the art as well, right? Like he
Yes.
writes it and pens it. Well, there's a name for it, right? Is it he doesn't do the penning? The
He
penning is
does
the
the
words,
pencils. And
pencil. Okay.
man, now I feel dumb. Did he ink this? I think he inks it too, and then Lynn Varney does the
Okay.
amazing covers. Oh no, Klaus
Oh no,
Janson.
Klaus.
Klaus
So yeah,
Janson, yeah,
writer and
duh.
penciler. Got
Yeah.
it. Got it.
Writer,
Okay.
penciler. Klaus Janson
Got it.
inks
So
it,
I
Lynn
do you
Varney
think
colors.
that's what gives him more control of it, right? That
For
like because
sure.
he is doing both, he can really use the medium even more so than many.
Well, I think in this, what it allows him to
Mm,
do is like I was thinking about this compared to Watchmen because these two
mm,
came out around the same time. Were the two big titans of graphic novels. Like before there really
right.
were graphic novels, these two were the first two. Watchmen and this were basically the
That's
ones
so
that you
cool to
really
be able to
heard
point
of.
back. To point back and be like, this was kind of the beginning of graphic
Yeah,
novels
this
as
is
like a thing, right?
yeah.
And it feels like it I have the same feeling after reading this as I did Watchmen,
Yeah.
in terms of like I read a novel, you know.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
But like I was kind of thinking of them both, and I feel like they're both playing with the medium. They're both using
Mhm.
all the things available to comics, that
Mm,
aren't available to other mediums.
yeah, yeah, I can
But
see that.
like they feel like doing totally opposite spectrums of that. Like Watchmen feels
Mm,
so controlled, so designed, like
I could,
so very
yeah,
like
because
a
I didn't get
puzzle.
lost in that. Yeah, I
Sure.
feel like I don't remember getting lost reading it in the way
Yeah, I
I did
don't
this, or needing to understand it better.
I
Like
don't
maybe
think
here and there, like little conventions, you know what I mean? But I feel like Frank Miller's using just like through the kitchen sink of this, in
yeah,
terms of like
well, yeah,
techniques
totally.
and
The
yeah.
the way I kind of thought of it is, to me, Watchmen feels like Bach, very baroque, lots of little
Mm,
details going on, but everything in its place, everything
right.
perfectly like
Hmm.
on the time signature.
Hmm.
Whereas this feels like jazz to me. This feels like
Mm,
he
okay.
like he has this kind
Okay.
of uh I guess it was the 16 panel grid. Like famously, if you
Mm,
kind of look at every page, you can think of these four panels, and it's
right.
4 by 4. So it's like
Right.
basically a 16 panel grid, but he'll break it. He'll,
Pretty well.
break up parts of
Yeah.
it to do things like this two-face thing where we're on both
Mm,
sides, and there's another
right.
great part of
Right.
this that does a similar two-face thing. But like
Hmm.
this feels like, because he has this structure, this would be like the basic time signature. Then he just
Well,
plays.
well, wait, go back real quick, because I want to say, like, I want to use that as an example. That's where it gets, you got to figure out how to read it, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, because your base, at least to me, is like left to right, right? But it
Right.
also throws me off because manga is the other way, and I also do read manga, and so figuring
Yeah.
out those conventions too, right? But so anyway, so obviously I'm going left to right through this. The left page is fine. I'm reading, the ones in black and white, the ones in color, the big splash, and then the little one. Then you go to the right, seems all fine, but then you get to the double, right? And
Mhm.
so it's like, okay, the double is kind of like its own page because you read it and then you go across the
Mhm.
top and then you go to the bottom, right?
Mhm.
Would like be my assumption.
Yeah.
But that doesn't like always quite, well, I mean, it does pretty much always pan out the left to right. But I
Yeah.
was looking at, for example, the one where he's fighting the mutant boss, and the
Mhm.
mutant boss's faces are these little circles like
Mm,
this.
mm,
And so
mhm.
I thought I was like, oh, I think I'm supposed to read all the circles, but then that like didn't end up being true. And so
Oh,
yeah, I think
it's
it
not.
is important to. Well, I mean, you do, but like you're still supposed to read them like left to top down, then over to the left again,
Mm,
then
mm.
over. So it's
Yeah.
not just fully down; it's just down for that top panel. So I think what you just said is really helpful as to
Mm,
anyone else
mm,
that's like
mm,
me who's
mm.
new. If you imagine this kind of invisible framework behind it
Right.
of the 16 that you're talking about, and then recognize that he's just manipulating that, but you're still using that as the reading pattern, then you'll be okay.
Yeah.
um I just didn't realize that because, again, like I said, sometimes with manga it does almost like this swoop, like a curve kind of thing. And so I thought maybe that's what was happening with this
Oh,
one, with like the tank scene.
interesting. Interesting.
But yeah, so no, it's like I said, I mean, I appreciate what he's doing, but I would say for any noobs out there, like I probably should reread Watchmen before I say this for sure, but I think I would remember. I would say if you're one of getting into novels, to read Watchmen first as a noob, and then read this one, recognizing the
Yeah.
conventions that this one's going to play with.
Watchmen definitely sticks to that grid a lot. Is unwilling to break that grid as much. It
Yeah.
does break that grid, but it is much more on that like
Mm,
um
right. Rare, I'm sure.
3 by 3 in that one, I think, grid
I'd
that
have
they're
to, yeah, look
doing
at it again.
now. So I want to just kind of show, though, like
Yeah.
the ways in this first one that I think he does this, that he controls pace, that he speeds up, that he
Mm,
slows down, that like builds
mm,
just like an orchestra building to
mm,
like the payoff. And one thing I wanted to talk about, because you talked about how like the still image,
mm,
these three of like where the still image I think works better than a moving image, that
mm,
you pick these three, right?
right.
Like no bat, kind of full bat, and then just the little hint of the wing.
Mm,
I don't know, man. There's something about that where I just feel like that's so beautiful. And if it
Right.
was moving, I would just go, yeah, there's a bat. You know, like, oh, there's a bat in front of the moon. I don't care.
Right.
But these things
Right.
frozen here like this just feels like gorgeous to me. It just feels like
Mm,
art to me. And he uses these panels over again. That's the other thing that
right.
feels very jazzy, is that there's this repetition of motifs that he
There
like
is.
seeds
Yeah.
them
He'll show
back
you the
in.
news reporter again. Yeah. I
Hmm.
noticed that. Which makes sense because they were releasing monthly as well. At
Yeah.
least like he will play back like the mutant group speech or the
Hmm.
Newfoundling the Batman group speech and spoilers. But yeah, yeah.
So let me talk about, so this is where I think like the magnum opus is of this issue.
Okay.
So that
Okay.
we're gonna get like the flashback thing to the origin. Very famous, very like influential on the movies, influential on every other retelling of the origin ever.
So
Uh,
wait, this isn't normal. I felt like this was just a quick, everybody knows this. I'm just gonna do it real fast. Was that not the
Well, did you feel this was
case?
fast? I don't feel like this is fast. I mean, as far as how many
Uh,
pages it takes, right? We get like three
right.
solid.
No, 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 it is with the eyeballs. It took me forever to figure out those were pearls. But yeah,
Mm.
with the yeah, I think for me it's just I've seen it so many times in so many incarnations. I was like, oh, this is just he's catching everybody up in case anyone doesn't
No,
know.
this is
Here's
the ones you've
here's
seen have been
here.
this. The ones you've seen
Okay,
come
great.
from this. I mean, this is
This is why
the
we talk about firsts, right? You know, we've had that
well,
conversation,
I
yeah.
mean, like,
But go ahead.
obviously, this origin is from the 1940s, right? Like, this is origin
Right.
is old, and it
That's what I
hasn't
thought.
really
Yeah.
changed over time, to my knowledge. It's always been he's been coming out of Zorro. You know,
Mm,
his parents get killed. He devotes his life to fighting crime, but being
mm,
told in this kind of way. And he
mm,
really hits like hard on the 16 panel grid. But things I think are just
mm,
amazing about this. One, how with Bruce are you here in these three panels? His
mm,
changing awareness and his changing mood. And I also think like this is
mm.
magical. This look up, what is he looking at? Always looking at a bat, of course, because this is high
Right.
mythology. This is not realism. Nothing in this
Right.
comic is realism. You can say it's grim and gritty, but it's not even approaching realism in here. The
Mm.
way Watchmen is kind of like very devoted to
It felt
realism.
real. Yeah, it felt real.
It has
With the
Doctor
fantastical.
Manhattan in it
Yeah.
and stuff, but I feel like that
Right,
one's
that's
trying
with
to
the
be
fantastical.
more real. This one's trying to be more noir, which noir is to me not very real. But I just love this moment of looking up and the magic of that, and I feel like I felt like that as a kid, you know,
Mm,
kind of catching sight of something that just looks
right.
magical. And then his changing awareness here, his dad puts the hand, and that we only ever just see the hand, I
Hmm.
think is
Yeah.
amazing. And then like, oh, his expression change right here, going along with the way the dad's hand changes right there. Gun. I think
Hmm.
that's amazing. And still that you convey everything that's happening just in this hand. Right?
Mm,
Like, oh, it creates a fist and it kind of like
right.
occludes Bruce's face there. And then like this
Mm,
start going up. And then like the light between these two is amazing. Now, this is the colorist, I think, Lynn Varney, who does an
mm,
incredible job in this whole comic. But that light is amazing. The hand, again, is telling the whole story there. And this is like, okay, this is slow mo. You just like,
hmm. Yeah.
it's just pictures on a page, but you feel the slow mo. It's I feel like I am watching a movie, like a slow
Right.
motion part of a movie in this. And like kind of in the 2000s, it became a big thing for like to say, oh, this artist is so cinematic, does like a lot of widescreen panels is usually what that was referred to. So like
Mm,
David Hitch would be like considered an ultimates. This is so cinematic because everything's a widescreen panel every time.
mm,
And I'm like, that doesn't feel cinematic to me. This feels cinematic to me. This comic
mm,
feels incredibly cinematic. There's so many times where I feel like I'm watching a movie, including on this next page. Like, how many
yeah.
times have we seen this sort of like scene in a
Yeah,
movie where the main character is
this I love.
changing the channels and it hits to
Hmm.
each channel in
Yeah.
rapid succession, and he does it with the grid just by
Right.
going, cool, now I'm gonna go eighth notes here, right?
Right.
Now I'm gonna go boom, 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 boom,
Right.
and get them in, and it's just so it's so
Oh no,
masterful.
this part definitely, like, I hate to say it, I mean, with all the passion you're describing this, it sounds like me when I was talking about like cultures and Wheel of Time or
Yeah,
something.
right.
Like, I'm like, yeah, dude, I just like turned the page. I didn't even like, I was like, I've seen this. I was like, oh
No,
yeah, this is like this is like,
so funny.
oh yeah, gunshot, parents dead, yep. But then I'm with you. I hit this part and it felt super cinematic. And then this scene of like the clouds behind him and everything is wow. It
Hmm.
took me a while to figure out. I'm like, I guess he's in his house.
Right,
What's
right, right.
falling over? But it's like you're saying, it's that mythic quality. But then it gets into the speech,
Okay, well,
and that's
hold
what
on.
got that's what got me. I
Let,
was like, oh,
yeah,
okay,
no, I want to keep
yeah,
going with this because I think this is
do
just the
it, do it.
prelude to the
Okay,
overture. You know, another
do
thing
it.
that he does with words, but we're in for a
Hmm.
whopper of throughout the whole rest of the
Hmm.
first issue they've been talking about the heat the whole time
Right,
and
right, right,
doing
yeah,
these cuts to
yeah.
the city with the heat that he does
Hmm.
constantly, and then it's gonna break. We're in for a whopper of we're not gonna say the word because you
Hmm.
know the word and you know it's
Right,
coming, and it's a storm, all right, but it's
right,
gonna be a different kind of storm.
yeah,
And then the
yeah.
clouds and him breaking the statue. I love also in this panel,
Hmm.
there's sound effects all over this comic, and then there are
Yeah,
places where they don't put
there's
the sound
nothing.
effects where there should be a big
Yeah.
sound, and that is kind of amazing as well. I don't know why that creates an emotion in me, but it creates some kind of emotion by going, actually, now we're not going to do the sound here.
Oh,
And
that's a funny thing too, because like as a newer reader, like I sort of just ignored all the sounds. Like I'm just not
oh,
used to
uh-huh,
sound effects at
right,
all. Like to me, I remember like the old Batman TV show with like whap,
right,
pow, and it would like,
right,
be up on screen.
right.
So to me, like I just sort of got this notion of them being like silly and not realistic, right? So I don't know. I just they weren't even on my radar. So that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
Like I really have to retrain my brain for
uh-huh,
reading this
yeah.
type of stuff. That's why I would go back and read it again and again and again and like try to
It's
try to
such
get
a
it. So yeah, I
good
still haven't gotten that yet.
it's
Yeah,
such a
I'm
good
not there.
tool, and the tool's going to
Yeah.
keep coming, right? Because like
Hmm.
this is a tool, and definitely like artists, sound effects are very beloved of people who love comics because it's a lot of
Hmm.
times the letterer's job to come up with these, and that's people who are like amazing letterers who often don't
Hmm.
get as much acclaim as the colorists or
Hmm.
the inkers, but a lot of times it's the
Okay.
letterers making these things, and the different effects you can create with them are kind of amazing. But these two pages,
Hmm.
like, this is another thing where this should be really loud and it's silent, right?
Hmm.
In this bat crashing through the window thing. Also love the light thing that Lynn Varney is
Right.
doing here. Like this
Hmm.
blackness before that happens. Oh my god, it just hurts my soul. It's so good. Like light. Oh, it's out. Boom. Comes through the
Well, and this gets
window.
back to the mythic quality as well too.
Yeah.
Like it's not like this happened.
Right.
It's this is just in his mind. Um, but yeah, that's what gives it this over the top sense. And Gordon speaks to that later when he's talking about Pearl Harbor and it like
Mm-hmm.
being too big,
Yeah.
and the idea of Batman is too big, right?
Yeah.
And so it is a theme throughout, and I think this helps express that. This was one of those first moments, though. This transition, one, the description of how Batman feels inside of him, like the
Uh-huh.
the spirit of Batman, the essence, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it, and the way that was written, and you cannot weigh me down like with these things. I was like, that's awesome. But then into this with the messages, I was like, oh, wait a sec. Wait, is Harvey out and kind of threatening him? Wait, what's happening? And then like Selena, I
Uh-huh.
was like, wait, is that Catwoman? Like,
Yeah,
wait,
yeah,
so
yeah.
like this was the scene I totally reread, and I loved it because, um, yeah, it trusts the reader to figure out what's happening. And
Well,
I feel
it
like
does
we've
require
lost,
you to know some
yeah,
Batman. I mean, like this,
it
should
does.
this be people's first Batman comic? It was my first Batman comic, and I think
Right.
it's fine, right? Like I didn't
I think
necessarily
it's
even
okay.
know who Selina was, and
Right.
it's even more confusing when she shows up at the end, like dressed as Wonder Woman. Like when I was a
Right.
kid, I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm not kidding. This is like Catwoman,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
Joker dressed her up as Wonder Woman or whatever.
Mm,
But
sure.
so yeah, like on one level, this
But
shouldn't be your first Batman comic. On another level, it absolutely should. Just go with the stuff that you don't understand. You will figure it out later.
wouldn't year one make more sense though? Because I assume he's younger in
It
year
would,
one?
yeah. Year one's a
Yeah.
great, very accessible comic to everyone. I don't think you're going to be confused for a
Right.
single second in year one.
Right.
But this one I wanted to do first because this one I
Right.
think is, God, I go back and
I
forth
mean,
between them, which one I
this
like
is
better.
this assumes you know who Batman is,
Yeah.
right? Like if I hadn't ever seen any Batman cartoons or movies or something like that, I don't
Mm.
think I could have appreciated it at the same level. But even if I didn't know who Selena was, just the idea of like, oh wait, he's listening to phone messages.
Mm.
Like for a little bit, like that's what I'm talking about, man. Like I was just like, oh, he's listening to phone
Well,
messages and clicking one
so
off and then starting the
we
next one. You know
also
what I
have to
mean?
talk about the 80s here because, like, this
Right.
is a super
Oh, I had an
80s
answering
comic.
machine. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had an answering machine. It's all good. It just took me a bit because I was like, wait, I thought it was someone behind bars. I thought we transitioned someone else. I'm like, oh no,
Okay,
wait, it's
okay.
still him. Oh no, wait. So like, yeah, no, there's a lot of me like being like, what does this mean? Oh wait, it's this. Oh, what does that mean? So yeah, I mean, I will just say it's like a tougher comic, but it's cool. I like working those brain muscles. It's like again, when we talk about fantasy of like some name being dropped and being like, well, what is that? And like kind of digging to figure it out. And I like the mental activity, and I do feel as if we are missing that with like my wife. She, I mean, Sky. She watches tons of TV, and she'll constantly talk about how like things are getting dumbed down. And I'll feel that way too. Like I'll read something or do something like it just doesn't have as much going on. It doesn't trust the consumer as much as it used to. Like I just played a new video game on the hardest mode. Didn't have any problems with like the first like two fights. It wasn't even an issue. I went back and played the game that was based on from like forever ago, based on Final Fantasy Tactics. If anyone wants to know, I gamed over twice. Like whole game over, had to reload from start. It was amazing. Time of my life, right? So my point is just like, and that's not the only thing. Like this is gonna sound crazy to our viewers, but my wife and I started watching like One Tree Hill as a joke, as like, oh, the show with like the crazy hot people. We started watching it. It's well written. I'm like, how can this possibly be well written? There's no way. And then we'll like watch another episode. I'm like, that was really well written too. How is this possible? And it's like this old show, and it could be like One Tree Hill. It's like normally you talk about like CW, like just dramas and no good. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm just on a nostalgia kick or whatever. And I know it's always the rose-colored glasses and all that, but this is not the case. I go back and read some old things, and I'm like, oh man, this doesn't hold up. I wish it did, right? I almost feel like I need to bring some of them out to like prove, be like, no, this is old and I don't love it. But seriously, I felt the work with reading this, and I feel like there should be some work in consuming things in terms of
Mm.
getting that experience more fully because it's work to feel deep emotions and be affected and fully appreciate a piece of art no matter what medium it is. I'm not saying
Yeah.
all art needs to be hard, but I'm saying there is a joy in consuming art that is very layered, that there's a lot to see if you go back and look at it again and again and
Yeah.
again. And this to me felt like something I could absolutely go back and read again and capture completely new things. And to me, that's very exciting as a reader. That's really cool.
I think there's like
Yeah.
you're what you're seeing a little bit was another thing that struck me on the more recent reread is like how minimalist Frank Miller is in a lot of these panels. I mean, a lot of these panels are very small, so it's going to be hard to pack in a lot of detail in them. Like the kind of more establishing where Bruce is in here, you're just imagining he's, in his mansion, but he's kind of really leaning on this window motif
Yeah.
just to sell that. And he does a lot of things where he just kind of
Mm.
implies things. One of the ones
Right.
that I
Right.
think is most amazing is the roller coaster. Like when we get to the
Oh,
Joker
I got
part.
so lost on that roller coaster ride.
I
I was
love.
like, what am I looking at?
I
I had
love the
no
roller
clue.
coaster, partly because I think the roller coaster is as insane as the Joker is, right? So I think there's something
Right?
like where he's like, I'm not drawing a realistic roller coaster. I'm drawing this insane abstraction of a roller coaster that I
It
think
was
actually works
wild.
really well. But it's also like he gets away with like minimalism a
Mhm.
lot. Like also reading this comic, I was like, does Frank Miller know
Yeah.
how to draw a car? Like I like
Right.
very
There,
famously, the very first page is maybe one of the most confusing pages of the whole comic, where he's in a car race but you're constantly
Right.
just on the close up of his face. And
Oh yeah, I
like,
was totally lost. I was like, what
right.
is this?
This one,
What
I
am I
don't think
reading?
anybody understands what's going on in the first page. Anybody who's ever
Right.
read this the first time through, because he
Because I'm like,
doesn't
is he in
draw
a
a car.
Batmobile? Right, he
Yeah.
doesn't. Well, and the helmet looks so weird. Like it was
Yeah.
just I'm like, am I, is this RoboCop? Where are we? What's happening? But yeah, there was definitely parts like this is my last one that I should get into some negatives before we, because I do have some criticisms that I'd like to hear your thoughts
Mm.
about. But the one that to me I looked at so many times was the car. Funny enough, the car. It's
The
this
Batmobile?
one. It's no, it's the taxi cab
Oh yeah.
where they get in and they're like cutting them up. And I want to say the way he does like accents and languages
Mm.
in this, loved it.
Right. I figured that would
Absolutely
be
loved it.
right
Oh,
up your
dude.
alley. Yeah.
Oh, I was all over. Like reading back through this again, like the way people talk is
Mm.
awesome. And
Mm.
again, it feels like you're kind of going to a new place
Mm.
with this. But anyway, like it's a part where Batman reaches in, gets the money,
Mm.
and then the guy turns. It sort of looks like there's another hand behind it, but I can't tell.
Yeah, I think it's
And
the criminals.
who's beat up? Yeah,
Hand.
maybe
Yeah,
yeah,
because
maybe
his
it's
hand
from
got
before.
smashed in the window
Right,
by his
right. So
foot
then
right here.
right. So you see like yeah, that you see like the hand kind of dangling, and I think that's so important. Like you got to see that hand
Mm-hmm.
dangling, know that that's the villain
Mm-hmm.
who's like beat up and unconscious
Who
now, I
we've
guess.
never seen.
Who we've never seen. Batman then takes the money. The guy's like, crap, he took his money, but it's the last panel. I'm like, did Batman tear the money up? Is that what happened? But how did Batman know that he gave him the money? Like that, dude, you don't even know how long I stared at this and I was like what is happening? And
Yeah.
that was something that I didn't remember from Watchmen. And again, as a noob, I thought it was the same person because I feel like these two, or at least more recently from talks with people, like we were like, yeah, Watchmen and this. Like basically it's you and my other friend who had me read Watchmen,
Mm.
who told me, he's like, let me know what you think of this when you finish it. But uh, I didn't remember feeling that way in Watchmen. I felt like in most of the panels, I knew what was happening, and there were definitely more in this which I didn't. Which again isn't necessarily a bad thing. It again gives it kind of that replay value, and I was never so lost that I lost the feel of what
Mm-hmm.
was happening, or I never
Yeah.
was emotionally lost in it. And I think that that was really important.
Like I said, I
Yeah.
think polar opposite of Watchmen
Mhm.
in a way, at least in its
Mhm.
approach to comics, like using all the
Yeah.
tools of comics, but using them in just a dramatically different way. And
Mhm.
like, I
Mhm.
think this lead up to
Oh
the
crap! I got
Batman
one that I skipped
reveal
on you.
here, let
Right.
me just do that because this is a thing that
Right.
I just it gets me every time, and like I can't believe how great it is.
Rumble.
But like,
The Rumble.
and using the rumble, so right, we're creating this mood, we've been creating this mood, this anticipation, the storm is coming, we know the storm is coming, rumble, okay, and then
Mhm.
we get the first sort of like save,
Right. Right.
bigger now, not that much bigger, but we get a lightning bolt,
Right.
we get rumble into crack, almost like this panel should like connect to this
Mm.
one with
Okay.
rumble
Okay.
into crack. Okay, bigger, so we're building, we're getting
Mm.
bigger, another little vignette where we don't really see Batman, we just see like something
Mm.
happening. Crack.
Mm.
Look how like just these using the sound effect things to amp it each time we go to our new thing. Amp it, amp it, amp it. Then we go to the arcade where we see
Yeah.
who's going to
Yeah.
be Robin. I love the color thing that we do
Mhm.
here. I love how, like, again, the O's kind of go across from the
Right.
previous panel. No, right? Connecting you
Right.
and like this. Then he's like, okay, let me bring in the TV people again to kind of like, not only are we seeing little
Right.
Batman things, we're going to hear about little Batman things that are happening.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
I'll intercut with this car chase that I'm going to do, which is now my kind of penultimate thing. And like, this is a thing, honestly, The
Oh,
Dark Knight Rises tries to do this exact scene. And
mm.
I think
Okay.
that's when my brain turned off in that movie, which is too bad because it's pretty early in the movie. But I'm like, this blows because it just tries to do this scene with the cops doing a chase and then like
Mm.
Batman comes
Okay.
in without doing any of this buildup. And it just doesn't it just doesn't work. This is just a screenwriter going, I read a thing that was really cool in a Batman comic. I'm just going to randomly
Yeah.
drop it into my shitty movie. And that's what they did
Right.
here. And like this going into like each one,
Mhm.
and like her saying, look, oh, could it be? You don't
Mhm.
suppose, right? And then like, what does
Right.
she
Right.
say? Oh, looking like Dracula. Um,
Right.
and then
I will.
like the thing that's amazing here, so we stay close on these cops' faces. I kind of love it when Frank does this. Like he's not showing you
Mm,
anything because
right.
he's gonna
You
reveal
don't
it
need
to
to.
you. He's
Right.
like, and then I just love this. We're in for a show, kid.
Yeah, I
And
know that line
and
was great.
Frank is like, here it comes. Here it comes. I'm
Right.
telling you right now, I'm going to give you a
Right.
show. I'm telling you. I'm letting you
Right.
know. I'm going to give you a show. And then, look at her, or at least the impression he was known to make. Like, you could
Mm.
have gone right after I'm about to give you a show and hit you with it.
Yeah.
You could have
Yeah.
done it. At least the impression that he was known to make. And let me show
Mm.
you the impression that he makes.
Boom.
Boom.
Right.
That is glorious. That
Well, and
whole
then with the
build up to
people saying
this.
that too, and
Hmm.
then what each person has to say about it kind of adds to, yeah, yeah,
I just think like that is one of like I just feel like amped up just kind of talking through it with you right now. Like I can't tell you like
right.
how thrilling, and it's a
Hmm.
combination of I'm changing up the pace on everything I do. I'm using all the tools. I'm using the sound
Mm.
effects to
Well,
build
yeah,
it.
dude,
I'm
going back through and seeing the lightning, I didn't even notice that stuff before. I was literally like basically reading this book on silent. So,
uh,
but no, but that's no, that is really neat that you're right. The way it goes rumble, because the next one even goes rumble crack, so
right.
they're like very, and they're using like the same kind of font basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but anyway, no, I hear you. I hear
Oh,
you.
I
Um,
love that. And he does that so often with the splashes, like his
mhm.
lead up to these splashes, and he always delivers in every splash in this book. Like, it's just so good. It's
Oh, I would
glorious.
say the one that I felt the most. I mean, I felt that one. I did. I
Mm-hmm.
did. But I just another one comes to mind is this one I did feel as well when the reveal of the
Right,
hands
right,
were like
right.
pulling back and then he's there.
That's an awesome
Um,
bit.
okay, so I gotta say the last thing, but we gotta get into the because we're already. I know I can tell why because you love this and obviously it's a lot to talk about. But I
Yeah.
will say the other one that I felt it for and I loved it is this one of Superman.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way this book did Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because um, this line, there's just the sun and the sky and him. Like he's the only reason it's all here.
Mm-hmm.
Then he ruins everything by talking. And like, I just enjoy this kind of absolutely majestic thing, especially as a counterpoint to Bruce, who's aged and older now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Superman has not. It's idyllic. And then this thing where Superman's holding like the bomb and he's like, if I'm weak, what's it like 4 million people die or something?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like the difference in perspective. Like Batman is so at the ground level and he's doing a lot. Don't get me wrong, like he's doing more than any one person could by showing him in all these places doing things, right? So Batman's already doing superhuman things. But then for Superman to be like on this whole other different perspective. But the one that got me, and don't get me wrong, I don't know if I'd say, I think in terms of what I've seen, maybe I'm more of a Superman fan. I mean, I really did like the Tim Burton Batmans, but like growing up as a kid, I loved Lois and Clark as a
Mm-hmm.
TV show. And so I just kind of love the like, Superman is like a nice guy trying to get things done.
Interesting.
But this one here of Superman, when he's talking to Mother Earth and the
Mm-hmm.
way
Mm-hmm.
he feels about Mother Earth and everything
Yeah.
and being connected to her, like I was just blown away. I was like, this is some of the best Superman work I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, like I'm a big fan of One Punch Man, which a lot of people would say is kind of like an alternate take on a Superman, like a way to make a Superman interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
really feel like we should do One Punch Man at some point. I know like getting an anime has been tough for you, but I feel like the like that is the one. Like it's got some ridiculous stuff it does, but it's only 12 episodes long, and
Oh.
it feels like this. It's
Mm.
well, not this specific comic, but it feels like a comic because it's a Superman story. Just you just
Mm.
imagine it's like a Superman story, but from like, a different viewpoint, different culture.
Yeah.
But anyway, this panel, this page with him, and especially getting shot by lightning like he does, as he's like
Mm.
trying to drift upwards to get to the sun,
Mm.
and then lightning just cracks through him, and then
Mm.
he's like this zombie on the ground. I was like, this is amazing. Like I absolutely love this.
Yeah.
But I got to get into a couple of the things that
Yeah, yeah.
were tough for me. So obviously we talked about just mostly what I think are noob things, and the fact that this is somebody who's really exploiting the medium in a lot of ways that maybe other people aren't. And so I think this one does take a bit more reading skill to get used
Mm.
to, or like being used to comics. But that's just like noob stuff. In terms of like actual story critiques, things for me that were like a little um I will say, I know you said the first episode was, or the first issue
Mm.
was kind of like the best, and I do agree with the buildup and everything. The tough part for me was, again, I think I just wasn't used to reading it yet, and I just got sort of confused at the end, and that kind of stole some of the thunder for
Mm.
me, because don't get me wrong, there's like some amazing lines with like the explosion leaving the world no poor, four men died. Like, I mean,
Mm.
I mean, amazing. But the scene with him and Two Face, I couldn't tell that it was Two Face at first. I didn't,
Mm.
I wasn't sure because the initial image of him, I was like, wait, are we back with someone else? Like, it didn't look, this shot with the shadows, it looked like someone who had a mustache or whatever.
Mm.
It's when he's like, look at me now kind of thing, right?
Mm.
Because he talks about playing along with it, and the words were in yellow. And I'm like, words in yellow. This part, yeah. So this right here, I was with it at the explosion. I'm like, okay, it seems like the guy jumped after him. He doesn't know he's Harvey yet. He's trying to figure out. He's got to know I'm with it. But then the words were in yellow, and I'm like, why are the words in yellow? And then he's like, I've played along with your game. I'm like, what game are you talking about? And then it cuts to this person, and I'm like, wait, did we just cut to like because I didn't see his fingers here because in the top shot like
Mm.
I was more concentrating on the yellow bubbles and I didn't quite see this that he was like pulling
Mm.
his thing back
Mm.
yet, and then I couldn't quite tell that these were the bandages below his neck, and it looked like he had a mustache. I was like, wait, the Harvey I saw before, I thought I didn't remember him being bald. I didn't remember him having a mustache
You don't
just because
remember
it's
him
been
being
like,
bald?
yeah, for some reason I didn't because
Uh,
we only saw him because it was so long ago. Okay, yeah, he is. He's bald. It was
yeah,
just
like
like
there's like a
it's just like
pretty straight on just his
yeah,
headshot. He looks
it's
kind
true.
of like Lex Luthor or something. I
It's
was
just
like,
been like this long since we've seen him. You
right,
know what I
okay.
mean? Like I haven't seen him in so long. I was like, who is this?
Mm.
Like it just didn't look like the same person to me.
Mm.
And I'm like, what's happening? And so I get it, and I like the idea. When I finally reread it and got that he's pissed at Bruce for basically like funding fixing him,
Mm.
but he like thinks that Batman is trying to suppress who he is, or like make make it a joke and make people be able to look at him like he
Mm.
views the way Batman tried to help him as a cruel joke, basically. And then the way Batman closes his eyes, or says he closes his eyes, and sees the true face of him, like
Mm.
that to me is all really cool. I'm just had to say I didn't quite get it. And then the last shot, I was like, wait, did Batman jump out the window? Is he flying away? Is like what's happening? So I couldn't tell if that was two separate shots because the shape of the office, like furniture, seemed to mirror itself.
Mm.
But you got to look like I thought it was two separate panels, I should say,
Mm.
because of the black line. But I see now that if you look, there's plants right here, and then there's something different on the other side. So this
Mm.
is just another window, and they somehow rolled around and got to a window beside the window they broke in from.
Mm.
So it's just a bat. It's just that mythic
Yeah,
thing.
right,
Again,
right,
I was
right.
like, is it the bat? I was like, is it the Batmobile
It's
flying
very
nearby?
interesting.
So
Yeah.
so that, but I'm just saying again, as a noob, like that to me was, I get that it was this probably really cool, like epic, moment, but to me it was a lot of me kind of like parsing it, and then it was over, and I'm like, oh, Okay, yeah, it was. I think it was sad. But so that to me, I think, is why some of the later parts spoke to me more, is because I was getting more used to reading it and more grounded in what was happening. But I do definitely feel you about that whole build up for it. Well, and
I
also you got
think
to figure
this
out.
has more. I love this little scene right here. I love again how he's using the grid. I love how he
Yeah,
makes these match
right,
these two. So
right,
there's real Harvey, there's real Bruce,
right.
right? And then he says a reflection.
Mhm.
I think, at least for me, I can't remember as a kid, what I thought about this panel, but at least for me, he's taught me enough what this image
Right.
is, because you see it with young Bruce, you see
Yeah, you
it
see what's young Bruce.
before,
Yeah,
you see it in the sky, a couple times. So I was like, oh, it's just
right.
another bat. So this read to me, and I think that's the silhouette is beautiful.
Oh, I love the
Like
silhouette.
he's
Absolutely.
crying in his arms,
No, no,
like
I
it's
love
just
this. I
gorgeous.
love this. I was just
Mm.
like, but then did he jump out the window? Like, so yeah, so no, but I'm with you. I do love this. And again, I would rather read something and someone be like, dude, no, look, this bad image is the same bad image he saw as a kid, and then
Mm-hmm.
the same bad image he saw as like when he's looking out the window, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And be like, right? And don't get me wrong, like I've made arguments in the past of like, why risk it? Like to me, I'd be like, maybe this bat could be a little smaller so I could know it's like a bat and not the size of a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also understand what he's going for. The bat is larger than life, right? Like that's the point. The bat is huger than it should be. So my point is that I respect the setup for that. So this really wasn't a problem that I think happened with the story. This was just more, again, I would say a noob issue.
Mm-hmm.
Was like it was unfortunate because I didn't get to appreciate it as well as I think others could. Um, but so yeah, so that was just something stylistically that I was like, what happened? But I love being able to go back and being like, oh, the pieces were there, and then I get to appreciate it in this kind of retrospective way, which is still maybe not quite as satisfying as the original hit, but still really really good. And I gotta say, this one, I love this shot. It's the one right above the Batman shot where he says, "Take a look," with the dot dot
Yeah.
dots on both sides. So this is
Wait,
something that's
what's that?
new. This is new to fantasy. I don't know if it's happening in other writing
Ellipses?
as well.
Uh.
Ellipses before the spoken word. So
Mm-hmm.
this is starting to take hold more
Hmm.
in writing. I don't know how it's been happening in other genres, but I have only recently seen it used in the past 4 years, and I really like it. It creates this nice like pause beforehand.
Interesting.
But that line to me, the take a look, where he's like just so defeated, everything's out of him
Mm.
at this point, is just it's beautiful to me. So no, I do enjoy the beauty of this. I just, again, as the new breeder, I feel like we're here to talk about new breeding. But now I'm going to get into finally, here's some real actual critiques
All right.
to the narrative.
Yeah.
Um, so, number one for me was uh, Batman's acceptance of the girl.
Mm.
I love the girl, Carrie, as Robin. Her shot where he's like, "What's your name?" and she's like, "Carrie," and then she's like, "Robin." I almost teared up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
seriously, I was like, I felt my eyes like
So
going.
good.
So I love it. But then when we find out she's like 13,
Mm.
something, I was like, "Whoa!" I did not. I thought she was like 16 or 17 or something.
Right.
So I don't know. It just seems sort of like I get that he wants to move the pacing along, but it felt like that we could have lingered a bit longer there on accepting her into the mix because Alfred plays the foil of being like, "What are you doing? You shouldn't
Right.
remember." And he's like, "I remember, but she's perfect. She'll be great." And he does train her, which I appreciate. He does say like, "In a couple weeks, then you'll be ready." And
Mm.
most of the missions, he's like, "Stay here." So I
Mm.
loved all that. Like, I
Mm.
appreciate that he's not going like, "Oh, suddenly Robin is amazing."
Yeah.
But
I
it did
think
feel a little fast for a 13-year-old. So that
sure.
to me was like just a little,
I think
and
that's
just the
another
drawing.
that is maybe
Yeah.
something that like yeah that people have more a problem with now than they did in the 80s. I think partly because this is also very as a big of a break as it feels, as modern as it feels, as different as it feels, it's very beholden to Batman history. Like I kind
Mm,
of love how we get every version of the costume. Like he does the
mm,
big oval, he does the
right.
blue and gray, he does the black and gray, he does
Mm,
like every kind of version. There's even like, I think at one point the commissioner calls in that first issue, and it's a red phone, kind of like the show, if I'm remembering
Mm,
correctly, was a
right.
red phone that the commissioner always called him on. And I think that age, again, like, why not make her 16? Why not make her 17?
Mm.
I think that age is very much in line with kind of classic Robin age. Or I mean, I
Oh,
might be
okay.
wrong
Okay.
about that,
I
but
don't
I
know,
I
obviously.
think like that classic Robin age is around them, like 13,
Mm.
14, and it's supposed to be back in like the golden age, silver age. The sidekicks were
Mm.
always just, a way for a kid to imagine themselves, in the story. So
Right. That
he
does make
he
sense.
keeps
Yeah.
this 13 thing, which, like, I don't know, like,
Right.
I'm okay with, because I don't think this feels real at all. Like, I don't think
Right.
there's any part of this at any point where I'm going, this is realism. Like, it
I mean,
so isn't. So, like, I don't.
I feel like he walks that line so well. It does
Mm
feel real for this world,
hmm. Mm hmm.
if you will. And again, maybe with the world so messed up as it is, you do have a 13-year-old
Mm hmm.
sidekick. It's just it feels like a tougher contrast because it's so gritty, but I feel like you could argue it, I guess, both ways. Like, because it's so gritty and dangerous, don't put a 13-year-old in that
Mm
situation.
hmm.
But because it's so gritty and dangerous, the world is going to crap, you'll use whatever you can, right, to
Mm
like get the job done. Maybe. But that to me was just a little odd and just was kind of a disconnect. The other was the weird robot kids. Now, I want to back up and say another thing that made the end of the first issue tricky was you had to realize that Joker hired that bomb maker who had
Right.
also been Harvard by Harvey Dent to
Yeah.
actually double cross Harvey Dent
Mm hmm.
to build it so the bombs would, which again, I love.
I
I
love it.
love that that is not
I love
said.
it's not
I
spoon
love that.
fed. Yeah.
I love that you have to figure it out.
Yeah.
You got to be Batman. You got to be a
Mm
detective
hmm.
and like
Mm
work that stuff out, which I absolutely for, right?
hmm.
But it's the same sort of for these kids, right? Because then we later see this other kid with an egghead shaped guy, and then he can fly. And I'm like, wait, why is this
Yeah.
kid flying? So
Yeah.
that was like
The
a
bomb
really weird,
makers. The bomb makers
yeah,
kids just
Bomb Maker's
fly.
kid.
Yeah.
And then it's got like this thing that's coming out of its mouth. And I'm like, I
Mm,
am super confused by what this kid is doing. And then that like poisons everybody in the audience and everything.
mm,
But then the other one that was tied to that. So I'm already confused about like this flying kid. I'm like, wait, are there superhero like children that fly around? And then I don't mind the reveal later that it's a robot, but man, you got to be
mm,
watching close to see his
mm,
head go away and then like see a wire,
mm,
which again I respect. I respect the
mm.
later reveal, but the shot where kid who's smoking flies up to the guy who's the sort of psychiatrist who we hate, which again is a great character. This guy that talks about how Batman's actually perpetrating the crimes.
Right, right,
Amazing
right,
character,
right.
amazing take on like psychotherapy that we can all be like nah or whatever about. But I couldn't tell if he was covering his mouth to save him
Yeah.
or covering his mouth to break his neck. And part of it was, I think, because I'm not reading sound effects. I mean, I did. I was like,
Mm,
crack. I think he
mm,
broke his neck,
mm,
but he's also still covering his mouth. So I'm like, but is he
mm.
protecting him? But then he doesn't fly away with him. And they do later say he died. But
Yeah.
that to me, again, I was just like, why is there a flying kid and did he save or kill this dude?
Right,
So
right,
like
right, right.
that to me was the part I felt like the most like, what is happening? Like
Yeah,
this is all
yeah.
just really weird. And then to go quickly, you maybe got a response to that one before I go to the last
I
one.
think I grant that one. That one, yeah, like you can think like, oh, maybe he wants to save him because that was the guy who was
Right,
kind of in his corner the whole time.
right,
And then you do have to read this sound effect a lot. And
right,
like you don't
right.
completely get that his he's still facing front when his head is like cracked around that way, right? It kind
Right.
of
So it
looks
was like
like maybe he
harder.
got behind him somehow,
Yeah,
but you're
yeah. I
supposed
think
to
he's like flying away with him, maybe. Like
right.
he's holding him and flying away. Like I can't. I'm just not sure.
That one I will
I,
grant.
right. I will say too, the Joker having all these different lipsticks ready, like
Mm-hmm.
lipsticks that can control control a call girl to then control a governor.
But
Like that. I was like, Joker had some plans for being in a coma for a while, and
I
he's
don't
got some.
I don't know if that has any precedent in comics. Like, like in comics, traditionally his lips are just always red. So, like, I
Right,
felt like that was an invention of this, that he's putting on different lipsticks, and it also kind
right.
of went along with the idea of age in a way that, like, oh, his
Mm,
lips have lost their color a little bit because
right,
he's older. But yeah, I
right,
don't.
right.
I'd be interested if anybody knows more Batman lore than I
Yeah,
do. If that came from anywhere, if that was just an invention of this comic,
yeah.
mind control lipstick.
So that was like, especially because it was so far removed. He's like, "Get your call girl," and then like the
Mm-hmm.
call girl, but is already with the guy. But then there
Mm-hmm.
must have been a point where he like brings them over, separates the call girl and the governor, kisses the call girl, puts her under mind control, then gives her mind control lipstick to kiss the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just like there's a lot of pieces that happen. But
Yeah.
again, he doesn't bother to do that just for the sort of pacing of the chaos that
Mm-hmm.
that Joker's creating. Because I think if you pull back and show each of those beats, then it doesn't feel as chaotic, right?
And I just
But
love
anyways,
this, that the governor's life is in danger. I haven't time to save
yeah,
him. It's up to you.
right,
And then
yeah,
like just that. And like Frank
right,
also knows when to not put a word. Right? Like when
right.
to
Oh yeah, that
not
was
put
great.
it,
Mhm.
and then you
I
just
love that.
you're inside
Mhm.
her head and
Yeah,
just like know what she's thinking there without having to say a thing. I love it.
completely, completely. The last thing for me, just to knock it out, was Superman being called in. We had obviously, well, Frank had obviously set the stage for this idea of, both Batman and Superman kind of worrying about the other person. Uh, and so, the conflict between them is set up, but after this huge, so there's this huge missile that like takes everything out. And I thought the idea behind that was to knock everything out so then they could be attacked but by nukes.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't seem to happen. So one, the Russian goal there seems odd to me,
Mm-hmm.
because it seemed like the initial one was just the way at least Bruce describes it. And I love that Bruce is keeping track of like what's
Mm-hmm.
happening with military
Right,
technology,
right,
and
right.
he's like, one of us has to worry about it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I like that also kind of parallels how Batman keeps count, and Joker says he doesn't keep count, and he's like, but I know
Mm-hmm.
you do, and
And
I
I
love you
love you
for
for
it.
it.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, again, like I can't even. There's too many amazing lines for me to talk about all the amazing lines
Yeah.
that are in this. But anyway, the point is that that was weird to me. Like I love the idea. I love the idea of we shut down all of that and then the chaos that happens. But then we talk about how the rest of America is like in chaos because of
Mm-hmm.
losing power, and the only place that's going well is
Yeah.
Gotham
Right, right.
because of like Batman and his troop. But then that's where they send Superman. I'm like, wait a second. If we got one place that's actually civilized, why are you sending
Mm-hmm.
Superman to take down that? Don't you have the rest of like the all the rest of America to worry about? So
Mm-hmm.
it just felt like again kind of this sort of forced pacing of like we just got to get to the next like big thing. Um, and so that to me, like again, I enjoy the conflict. I absolutely love how Batman does the "I'm not hearing you" talk again. Like Bruce, you always got the right things to say, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even listening to you. I love that
Mm-hmm.
idea of somebody talking, trying to convince somebody of something, and the other person just isn't even listening
Right,
and just
right.
worried about their plan. Like I love that.
And
I love it.
Clark doesn't even
Um,
know that he's not listening.
Right.
Right. I
He
like
doesn't
it.
even know he's not listening. So I love that. So again, I enjoy the conflict. And I know why they want to have it. I didn't feel sold about the reason why it needed to exist, especially if this is like the one quasi utopia that's been left. I love that it happens on the same street that his kid, like that his
Mm.
parents were killed.
Right.
I enjoy the funeral. Alfred, perishing in the same. Like it all felt very poetic. Like this to me felt ballsy because Joker like kills himself and is, like,
Mm.
and no one will ever know that you were too weak to do it.
Mm.
Amazing.
Mm.
Amazing, right?
Mm.
I love that. It felt true to each character. The Batman couldn't quite do it. And he's
Right.
always thinking about how many people are still dying because he hasn't killed him yet. So, like,
And
all that was
that's the
great.
thing that adds the murder
Yeah.
count to
Hmm.
Batman. Like this is like the
Exactly.
thing that puts it over the
Hmm.
edge that we have to bring him
Right.
down now because he committed murder.
Right. So, and I like all that. It just, and then I even like the final setup. This felt to me like I never watched the what was it, Batman Beyond cartoon, but it felt like I was getting it. Like at the end of
Mm.
him,
Mm.
like now
Mm.
he's dead and gone, but he's got this
Yeah.
new crew that he's setting up to focus on the future, which felt neat. I mean, but the reason I say it is because he killed Joker and because he killed Alfred, I did believe that Batman was dead.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
yeah, so I want to say, again, in terms of training a reader, I think this is what George R. R. Martin did,
Mm,
obviously, in Game of Thrones, or at least early Game of Thrones, where he
yeah.
was, killing people.
Right.
You're like,
Right,
anybody
right,
could
right.
go, and I felt that here. So this scene felt right
That's
to me,
interesting.
and I really enjoyed it.
I can't
Yeah.
remember as a kid what I thought there.
Mm.
Like I can't create a memory where I don't
Mm.
know what's going on, in
Sure,
this
sure.
scene. And of course it's a reveal, but
Right,
and of course I mean I love every bit of it. I love like
right.
Carrie's reaction. I love like the wink.
Mm.
And as much as like
Right.
people are like Frank Miller hates Superman, I feel like
What?
he's
Superman was amazing in
well,
this.
yeah,
I
I
love
feel like he's
Superman.
being critical of Superman. That Superman has become the
Mm,
government stooge in a way, and Bruce is obviously
sure.
very critical of him. But this is so throughout, it's
Right.
so lovingly done. Again, that part
I felt
about
it
him
was
talking about the Earth being
Earth.
mother and giving me the power,
Yeah,
and like,
this is the most I've loved Superman. Well, I mean, again,
right,
Lois and Clark always, but
uh,
this, yeah, I would hard disagree with that.
I
Now, granted, I'm a noob coming in here, right?
mm,
But I thought I would agree with what you just said that it was lovingly done. Like
yeah,
people are critical of each other, and the point is that there's not a good choice.
mm,
That's what they're contrasting is that Batman is trying to be larger in life for his city, right?
yeah,
And Superman is worried about the world, and so
mm,
there's this contrast in between the two. But yeah, so I really liked it. I mean, for a moment, I was a little disappointed that it went Romeo and Juliet on me, and that he was back to life. I was almost sad that Batman was back, but then the end sold me.
mm,
The end got me of like him with the mutant gang because I love this. I really like the mutant gang as the enemy because they're what felt like this world that's gone over the top.
yeah,
And then the fact they transition to like his troops, or at least some of them, and it makes
mm,
sense. There's splinter factions, right?
yeah,
There's like the ones that are still the same type because they're still in prison. Then there's the ones that become like robbers with Nixon masks. Then there's the ones that become like, Batman groupies, right? Like that all just was super cool because that's what would happen when a band breaks up, right?
mm,
And so the fact that that crew is still being used at the end, that just felt like such a beautiful through line
mm,
to the story, and that he's thinking about the next generation and how he's going to keep it going. So this end scene with them
exactly,
all in the cave together left me good, and especially this end thing about a good life, a good death.
mm,
Um, I was with it, especially because there was a one that was like, this would be a stupid death, like in the middle,
right, right,
like,
right,
the one, but where he's dressed up as like, a wino or whatever.
yeah.
But anyway, so those were my main ones. Overall, I absolutely enjoyed it. It was an experience, an emotional roller coaster. I was very surprised how political it was,
Yeah.
and how much I thought a lot of it still resonated, and how he did create this sort of alternate world that did still feel very real to me. I get what you're saying that it's got these mythic qualities that go beyond realism. Like I thought he was a monster creature, but then it's described that he's like, oh, just filed his teeth or whatever, right? I'm like, oh, okay. So,
Right, right.
but it does have these over the top things, but it's grounded in such humanity and pain, especially like with all the people talking about what it was like to be part of like the riot, and like Commissioner Gordon, or just Gordon
Mm-hmm.
taking charge
All
afterwards,
those
and his
parts are
wife.
beautiful.
Oh, him talking about his wife and how she always needs something
Mm-hmm.
extra from the store, and then that's why
Yeah.
she's gone. Like,
Mm-hmm.
dude, like talking about just these beautiful buttons that happen. It's like
Yeah.
I told you with Harry Potter, that it seems crazy. Well, I bring up Harry Potter to talk about this, but rereading the first Harry Potter, she had that where it was like, oh, this plot thread, this plot thread,
Mm-hmm.
this plot thread, just kind of like bing, bing, bing. And we had watched that video not too long ago about Star Wars and stuff, and about endings, and
Mm-hmm.
about the faster you're resolving each of those endings, the way that hits, like with pacing wise. And I felt that with this,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like with the Gordon resolution, the sort of Superman resolution, the Batman resolution, like the Carrie with Batman with Mutant Team resolution. Like, so I felt like it was hitting those together, at the very least, Gordon
Mm-hmm.
Batman, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that that was super effective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And set up.
My like kind of last thoughts about this. I think like
Mm,
there's some things that when people read this, it gets a bad rap in a way, and I think also maybe because of Frank's later
Mm.
stuff, which I'm not honestly as familiar with, but I think like the satire in this, I think is handled kind of remarkably.
I loved it.
The talking
I
heads
loved
on
it.
TV, I like
We're
that
amazing.
it's not just purely making fun of or purely critical. I don't ever
No, they show both
actually
sides. Yeah.
exactly, and I don't
Yeah.
feel Frank totally taking sides one way or another. Like on one side, you might say
Yeah.
like, oh, he's always going to be on Batman's side, and it's like. Yeah, but like when people
Kinda.
talk about civil liberties, they're making like a legit point. You don't feel like
Yeah.
Frank's making fun of their point that like, oh, Batman's acting like a
No.
fascist. And I've seen people call this comic fascist, like it's celebrating fascism. And I don't think that's what Frank's doing at all. I think he's
No.
very
Yeah.
serious about two sides. I don't think he's on Lana Lang's
Yeah.
side
Right.
entirely in those two-part conversations. I
Right.
think
Right.
it's incredibly even-handed, and then even when he is kind of making fun of somebody, he's making fun of like kind of human foibles, like in that
Right.
last issue where you have the guy who's like kind of clearly a jerk, and I think it's
Yeah.
maybe the
Yeah.
same guy who pushed the
It
guy in
is.
the
It is.
Superman
It's totally the same guy who
one, so
pushed the dude. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's the same dude, but like you still feel that like the way he's justifying himself, it felt like
Hey.
Nabakia a little bit with
Yeah.
the way Humpert like justified
Yeah.
himself, and you get to see around those
Yeah.
justifications, and then it kind of
Right.
it ends on that, and this is
Yeah, I
like the
thought he was gonna grow. I thought he was gonna grow. Like, yeah, I
right.
was
He
like, oh,
doesn't
this will be the
really.
time where he does some, but he doesn't.
No.
And again, I feel like that shows, at least for this group, why Batman is needed. But
Hmm.
again, should Batman be needed, right? Like if it was a better situation. So
Right.
I feel a lean toward Batman, but I don't think it's full at all. I think the fact
Yeah.
that those sides are presented and then we just cut away. Like
Yeah.
it's not there's like a third party saying which one is right. It'll be someone being
Right.
like, that's all the time we've got, kind of
Right.
thing,
Right.
right? Oh, I
And I
have to say
also
one last
love in
one.
that scene,
This
just to say
this
that last thing
right.
about the humanity of this thing that I think people underappreciate is like then
How could
he
you under
ends
sure.
that whole bit with first
Mhm.
him arriving on the horse. Again, I think it's
Right.
another pacing marvel, kind of
It's
almost on
great.
par
Yeah.
with issue 1.
Mhm.
The fact that we zoom in on those characters with those
Mhm.
interviews after the fact. Like look at
Right.
how just
He builds a world.
how sophisticated that is to
That's
go, you're
that's why I'm
gonna read,
surprised.
you're gonna get that this is an interview post what's been happening, even though I
Yeah.
haven't done that really all comic,
Yeah.
but you're gonna get that, and that they're being interviewed and talking about what happens while I intersperse
Right.
it with little shots of what's happening. It's so
Right.
cinematic that people just
It's
aren't
so
doing this in comics. I don't know
no.
why, because it's
This is
amazing.
well, it's super complex writing. This is
Yeah.
incredibly complex writing, and that's what blew me away about it. One, again, it's very well written in parts, the way it can convey an emotion like this kind of spirit of Batman that I think you get in the first one where you're talking about kind of the big transition and all that.
Hmm.
But then to juggle this many balls and think, oh, we're here, oh, but we should be there, and then we should be there, but it works.
It
I think this
works.
is an incredibly impressive work of art
So
altogether.
impressive.
And to the one last thing to humanity, I don't know how anyone could not see the humanity in this when you've got somebody who is in a spaceship that is now plummeting to the earth
Hmm.
and is writing a note to
Right.
someone saying,
It's gonna
you will
burn
never
up.
see this because it's going to burn up.
Hmm.
And just like the wishes for humanity. Like it's,
Well, I
I
was just
mean,
thinking about in that
it's
scene,
amazing.
the
It's
priest
amazing.
saying that the
The
guy
priest
who
too.
annoyed him
Yes.
earlier sat by him the
It's
whole time. That it's
sat down
like
all night.
it's super
Yeah.
critical of humanity in ways that I think hit and
Yeah.
are super true, that like people
And
would
still
react
today.
badly in
Yeah.
this situation, that they would react
Right.
selfishly in this situation, and Batman's got to come in on his horse, to like
Right.
kind of lead people from acting that way. But then it also puts these little moments of hope and like
Yes. It
beauty,
does.
like the
It does.
kid staying with the priest the whole night
Mhm.
after that was the
And
person
and
annoying him.
and it works as a contrast. Like again, I
Hmm.
expected the guy who's the jerk to learn. He doesn't,
Yeah.
but the priest does.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's what I feel it's saying. It's like, yeah, maybe not everyone's going to learn and grow right away or even change
It's
in a
not
situation like
Pat.
this. but some people will, and that's the hope,
Mm,
right? Even that scene with the spaceship falling, there is hope in
mm,
his message, and I
mhm.
thought it was beautiful the way he writes. It's in the bubble, but then you can also see the art of it
Yeah,
on the
that's
page.
very cool too.
I
Yeah,
hadn't seen that before, so yeah, no, I think
overlaps slightly.
if you're into comics at all, if you like Batman at all, I can't imagine not reading this as a fan. To me, I read this, I really enjoyed it. I liked it as a work of art. To me, I'm like, I wish Frank Miller wrote fantasy. And that's so funny, right? Because I'm reading a book about a Batman and a guy who flies around. I'm like, if only you wrote fantasy, you know? But just, yeah, the level of humanity, sociology, he's bringing to this, I did not expect, and I loved it. So yeah, I was for the most part incredibly impressed by this. I don't know if I can say I liked it more than Watchmen. I feel like I have to reread
Mm,
Watchmen. Um, but yeah, I wish I could find fantasy comics like this
mm,
because I do keep trying to buy various fantasy comics. I feel like maybe
mm.
we should have an episode of like here are the ones I
Interesting.
bought. They're
Huh.
not that great,
Mm,
but you know, so on and so forth. But yeah, it seems like it's tougher to find that because you'd think it would be. When I was in France, I went to a comic book shop and there were some incredible French comics, and I bought one,
mm.
but I haven't read it yet because I don't know how to read French.
Right.
So maybe that's where all the great fantasy comics are hidden
Oh,
away.
yeah,
It's
maybe.
in France, maybe. But anyway, that's another for another time. But I just want to say that was the feeling I was left with was just a deep appreciation for him as an artist and as a writer. Again, his art wasn't always clear to me, but I can see, especially after talking with you, how well he's using the medium to convey his story. And so this would definitely be a recommend for me.
Do you
This
consider
was
Conan
yeah,
fantasy?
Conan the Barbarian, sure,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Well, there's some
yeah.
storied runs of Marvel Conan
Really,
comics that I've never really dipped into. There's some Barry
I
Windsor
would.
Smith
Dude,
art on
he's
Conan.
heralded. Robert E. Howard is heralded as like one of the beginnings of
Hmm.
fantasy besides Tolkien
Interesting.
that isn't talked about that much. I actually just started reading some old Conan.
Okay.
It is very stylized but intriguing. So I would
Hmm.
absolutely be down to
That'd be
do a
interesting.
Conan read and
Something
a
to check
Conan
out.
comic.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and
Hmm.
also that's where Robert Jordan cut some of his teeth.
Oh, right,
He
right, right.
did some Conan. If
Okay.
wait, am I totally wrong about that? But I know I think I'm right. I'm like,
I
was
think
it
you
another
mentioned
writer?
that when we
No,
were
no,
going
no.
through real time.
He did. Yeah, we were definitely talking about that before. But is that where he got he got to practice like fantasy writing
Hmm.
in that space, right? So no, I would be into that. Man, we just got a whole bunch of ones that we thought about with this.
Yeah.
But I feel like should our show be comics versus fantasy? No, I don't think
Comics
this one.
versus fans.
But I don't
Let
see
me.
how, okay, but this feels literary to me. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
how, because it's talking about the human condition, it's talking about society, it's talking about politics. Like, I don't know how this couldn't be considered.
I
No,
I think this
right?
is one of the most elevated
Yeah,
genre things, along with
yeah,
Watchmen, that I think I've ever
mm,
read. It's solidly genre. It's so noir, like his voice the whole
mm,
time, all of Batman's inner narration.
right.
You can hear coming
Yeah,
out of
mm,
a noir mystery,
yeah,
protagonist.
for
But
sure.
it definitely elevates it. It's got so much going on. And here's the
Cool.
last thing I'll say. If like the
Okay.
only thing this comic did was give me this image right here, I think it would be still a masterpiece of Batman comics. This thing is the most beautiful thing I think I've ever seen. Like when every time my eyes hit this, I'm just like, God, that looks incredible. And it's just so like this is like everything you want in a comic, this shot. And again, it's built up so great,
Mm,
before then,
yeah,
but like,
yeah.
man, I just love this thing.
Well,
All
it's
right.
super nostalgic for sure. Well, I guess the original was blue and then it went black, right? Like the
Yeah,
first Batman
so
was the blue. Yeah,
yeah.
and that's why in the issue
Well,
one we get the blue
well,
Batman.
I mean, I think if you go back to Bob Kane, 1940 something, he definitely looks like he has more of like a Dracula type cape, and I believe it's a black cape or
Okay,
gray,
okay,
but not the
okay,
oval. The oval, yellow oval, kind of came later. I'm not sure exactly
okay,
when, and yeah, and it transitioned into like kind of more
okay.
blue for a long time.
Got you. I was just curious because we talked about the other splash of him jumping in on that build
Yeah, and
up.
that's in blue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. Cool, man. And I mean, you got me pumped for. Seriously, I'm looking at this. I'm like, man, if someone could just do this in a fantasy space. I mean, I feel like that's what Saga. I mean, Saga's pretty big for a reason. That it is more sci-fi, and I am more strict fantasy. But anyway, another potential conversation. Would love to hear from you all, everybody. Obviously, your thoughts about The Dark Knight Returns. When it was originally called The Dark Knight, or was it
No, it's
always
the
called The
Dark
Dark Knight
Knight
Returns?
Returns. Yeah.
Okay, The Dark Knight Returns. And obviously, any other comics that you would be interested in. Obviously, we've expressed some that we might be looking at next. And maybe we'll be doing a Ninja Scroll, which was the very first anime that I ever watched.
Oh, Ninja
Easy, just it's
Scroll.
just a movie, so
Hmm.
easy to watch. So yeah, anyway, more to come as always, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.